Good morning. It's March 28th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. Nearly to the end of March. Spring's finally coming along. That's good because after 51 years in Canada, I still have to admit I hate winter. So I'm looking forward to sunnier, warmer days. This show, well, I won't be any sunnier and warmer. I'll still be the crabby devil I always am. But this show is going to be coming to you live daily at 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, Monday to Friday. It's the Western Standards news and opinions sort of show. We get a lot of great guests and things like that. Good to see everybody coming in from Pamela and Monty Lake, BC, and others from all over the place. I like seeing those comments. I like showing, why it's important to have these live shows as to opposed to so many recorded ones. We can have that interaction, chat with each other. Perhaps I can get some questions forward to the guests or comments towards me. Just try to keep things civil, of course, keep on the up and up, and we can all enjoy ourselves on this ride today, heading towards Easter. Cheryl saying, I think Will Smith was triggered. Yes, he certainly was. And I'm going to start off with talking about that in a moment. I just want to mention today's guests. I'm going to have Charlie Pester. He's with Points. And these guys, it's an organization actually that helps people fight traffic tickets and such. And of course, he's well dialed into how traffic courts work and what they are. And Alberta quietly backtracked on their little plan to end traffic courts. So it's going to be interesting to talk to Mr. Pester about that and some of the other challenges. Because when the government backs down on something, it doesn't mean they're done. Often just means they're trying to take another approach. Dave Bradley from Bitcoinwell is going to come on quickly. We're going to talk a bit about Bitcoin and digital currency policies in Canada. And then I am going to have Western Standard Parliamentary columnist David Krayden on the show. He's been writing a lot of stories for us out of Ottawa out there, where a lot of opinion articles on it. Good to see you. A lot of people from BC. I see Wanda and Lisa and BC Prairie Girl. Wow, you're all out there. Scott's in Fort Mac. So we're getting a good, broad selection of viewers. I appreciate it. So let's talk about Will Smith. We got it. It's the top of the news. Let's talk about the Academy Awards. And the Academy Awards last night were interesting for the first time in years, but for all the wrong reasons. The annual spectacle has been experiencing a steep decline in viewership for years now, and much of that's due to people tiring of the celebrities using the stage as a pulpit to righteously lecture us over the latest social justice cause of the week. We watch, or at least we used to watch, in order to see the top people in the realm of movie production recognized and awarded for the best products of the year that they've produced. It's a huge industry, and it's a craft that takes talent and tremendous work to excel in. We don't, however, really care what their political views are, though we still get constantly barraged with them. Now, the spectacle last night, if nothing else, showed the world, though, just what an odd, disconnected, cloistered, entitled world the Hollywood elite live within. So I'm going to play a clip of what happened for those who haven't seen it yet. And I'm going to warn you, there's some graphic language in it. And it's about a minute. Take a second to turn on your device if you don't want anybody to hear Will Smith's expletive-laden tirade. But, it's going to be hard to rant further if you haven't seen actually what has happened. And I'm sure you've been hearing people talking about it all morning. So here we go.
Who's got the hardest job tonight? Javier Bardem and his wife are both nominated. Now, if she loses, he can't win. He is praying that Will Smith wins. Like, please, Lord. Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right? That was a nice one. Okay. I'm out here. Richard. Oh, wow. Wow. Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth.
Wow, dude.
Yes.
It was a G.I. Jane jump.
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth.
I'm going to, okay? Okay. That was a greatest night in the history of television. Okay. Okay.
Now, wasn't that something? What a bizarre moment. And it is too bad because, I think Chris Rock is hilarious and Will Smith is a fantastic actor. But it shows these guys, again, they aren't in the real world with the rest of us, guys. So let's break this down a little. Chris Rock went over the line. He made fun of Will Smith's wife with a joke about her alopecia, a condition that causes a person to lose all of their hair. It was crude and it was uncalled for and it was the wrong place for it. I mean, this wasn't a celebrity roast or a small stand-up gig. Now, all that said, it didn't justify Will Smith's getting up on the stage and assaulting him. Oh, I know, it was just a slap, but it was a single hard-hitting open slap, and rather than beating him to a pulp, it was still an assault. Humanity never ceases to disappoint me, but one positive development we've had in the developed world is a total intolerance for physically assaulting somebody. It's simply not considered acceptable, nor should it be. Now, Smith could have reacted a number of ways, whether it's walking out of the show, shouting from the floor, or simply ignoring it and talking with Rock and the show producers after the show. Whether he was in a bad mood or had a head full of Colombian marching powder, who knows? His judgment was poor, though, and the spectacle was sad. Whether we like it or not, people look up to the Hollywood elite as role models, and they really should stop. The elites of Hollywood, for the most part, are spoiled, entitled, liberal children who should only be taken seriously when they're practicing their arts in the entertainment field. They have little exposure to reality, and as we can see, very little grip upon it when they encounter it. Now, some people have been trying to portray Smith's act as being chivalrous. I mean, perhaps that was the intent, but it still doesn't justify an assault like that. Society, for the most part, has moved beyond that sort of action. Rock shouldn't be let off the hook either. I mean, what the hell was he thinking going with that personal joke in a primetime performance? Again, though, it demonstrates that disconnect and self-centered view from celebrities. Rock was only thinking about making his mark on the show, not about how it would impact the person on the other end of the joke. Some people think this might have been a purposeful publicity stunt. I wouldn't put it beyond the clowns in Hollywood, but I doubt it in this case. I mean, they're even calling some people, they might take away Smith's Academy Award in this. And they didn't get good ratings out of it, guys. I mean, if it was staged, they cut it in the United States. People didn't see that. The only people who saw it were in Australia and Japan. They're all seeing it after the fact. It was a very terrible job if indeed it was staged. But if anything, it's boosted YouTube's ratings. The Academy Awards show dumped Kevin Hart a couple of years ago over some tasteless tweets he did. But now they have hosted a physical confrontation between two privileged celebrities. They really need to get their priorities straight if they want to claim that virtue signaling high ground they're always pursuing. Normalizing assault is not a good development here. Keep this debacle in mind the next time you see one of these celebrities telling us how we're supposed to live and consume energy and how we're supposed to eat, vote, and govern ourselves. These people are not to be taken seriously, and we should really stop giving them ink for anything aside from their work in entertainment. Oh, I know I'm giving them attention right now. They're here to entertain us and distract us from the world for a little while. They're not here to educate us, and we shouldn't let them try. Ricky Gervais said it all too well when he eviscerated them while hosting the Golden Globe Awards for what I'm sure has got to be his final time. I won't insult you with an attempt at his accent, but I will quote it. This is what he said as he got ready to give the awards. So if you do win an award tonight, don't use it as a platform to make a political speech. You're in no position to lecture the public about anything. You know nothing about the real world, and most of you have spent less time in school than Greta Thunberg. So if you win one, come up, accept your little award, thank your agent and your God, and fuck off, okay? It's already 3 hours long. Now let's get on to the first award. I can't close it any better than he did back then. So that's addressing the latest in the news and what's been going on today. We'll watch as that develops. I wouldn't be surprised, actually. There might be some charges laid as things go forward. A bizarre night, but it keeps us with lots of spicy stuff to write about. So let's get on to some real news now and talk to the Western Standard news editor for a check-in, Dave Naylor. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
It's going well, Cory. I think, as one of your viewers noted, Will Smith was triggered.
Yes, he certainly was.
I hear you had a sad weekend.
I did. We culled our flock of chickens at home. And yes, as a man who's not been a farm-raised guy, I did a lot of outdoors work and things, but they had to be moved along. They'd gotten too old to produce any longer. And the reality and cycle of life meant I had to take them out. And I'm a terrible wimp when it comes to it, so I'll be quite shattered for a while over this yet. But the freezer is full.
And you got fresh honey to look forward to, right?
You do. I'm getting the bees in, so then I'll be able to report on the show the multiple stings and other incidents I'll get before I torch the hive.
All right. Well, on with today's news, and it's already been a busy Monday morning, Cory. In Ottawa, the controversial MPP Randy Hillier has turned himself into police. He's facing 9 different charges, mainly due to his COVID preachings, and he's also charged with assault on a police officer. So he doesn't know where that charge is coming from, and the only thing he can think of is he hugged somebody, and that's being misinterpreted, and he's now facing an assault charge. The bizarre news continues out of Ottawa. A report out today showing taxpayers have funneled millions and millions of dollars out to pay for quarantine hotels. Thousands of hotel rooms booked for months across the country to house COVID travelers, and $139 a night they were paying for these thousands of rooms. Barbara Kay, you're one of your columnists. Cory's got a good column up already on Trudeau and the Emergencies Act, and you can just guess what she thinks about that. A couple of Saskatchewan stories. Scott Moe is in Europe, in London today, opening up a trade office over there, and also going to Germany to try and increase exports and economic development within Saskatchewan. Gazillionaire Bill Gates has been invited to speak at a TED conference in Vancouver, next month. He's featured with all the left-wing types. You got Al Gore and Elon Musk and Bill Gates all speaking at the Vancouver event, and they're having what they're going to be calling a super protest against him. The federal officials were testifying at the Transportation Committee that the Freedom Truckers posed a threat to social cohesion. They said their use of the internet was problematic, and all sorts of horrible things like that. Our Dave Makachuk has got an interesting column up there on his thoughts on Canada should get rid of the RCMP. He uses the example of our BC Bureau story yesterday from Reed Small that shows it's been 40 days since those 20 terrorists came in and caused millions of dollars damage to the Coastal GasLink pipeline, and no arrests, no leads, no updates, just a typical radio silence from the RCMP. We've got our Foreign Minister Jolie calling for Russian wartime censorship. She wants basically everything from Russia censored because it's misleading. And we got the Canadian Association of Journalists, that bastion of journalistic freedoms, violated their own policies on fact-checking when they reported some of that blockade stuff where their two reporters were arrested in BC a couple of months ago. So that's what we've got up now. We have big breaking news out of Ottawa. The Liberals have announced they are going to be buying new fighter jets. Initial reports say it's as many as 88 of them, and at $35 million a piece. Cory, I don't do math, but that adds up to a fair chunk of change, I think. And we got one more Bill Gates story coming this afternoon. He's building a luxury new mansion, or bought a mansion down in San Diego area. And interestingly, his buddy Al Gore has predicted that's one of the places that's going to be underwater when climate change wreaks havoc and raises the levels of the ocean. So hopefully he's got good flood protection down there in San Diego, Cory. That's it for now.
Right on. Well, yeah, these news check-ins, I mean, just to pat our own back a bit, just to remind everybody, boy, they're getting long. We get so much content coming out every day with such a large crew across the country now. Lots to read and lots to follow up on.
Yeah, Chris Oldcorn in Saskatchewan has hit the ground running, and Matthew down in our Ottawa bureau, he'll be doing the fighter jet story, and our new Edmonton reporter Rachel is currently making her way across the country from Ottawa to take up her job there. So yeah, we've got people in all the places that's big in the news right now, Cory.
Great. Well, thanks for the check-in, and I'll see what's happening after the show there, Dave.
Take care, Cory.
All right. So I'm just going to hit a sponsor very quickly before we get to our first guest here with Charlie Pester from Points, and that sponsor is Bitcoinwell. I'm going to be talking actually with Dave Bradley from Bitcoinwell a little later. I promise you it's not an infomercial. We're talking about some digital currency things, but we may as well be on the up and up. They are a sponsor of ours, and they're a fantastic one. Bitcoinwell, if you're looking to get into digital currencies, these sites it's a place, it's a service. They help educate you, make you comfortable, and let you safely get involved with digital currencies if you choose to, if it's for you. I mean, that's the thing too. People go there, they read about it. Maybe it's not for them, and they move along, but you want to make sure your money is safe. That's the biggest thing I think that holds a lot of people back from getting in. They don't quite understand it. It's so new. They've worked hard for their money. you want to make sure that you're not getting scammed. These guys are a Western Canadian company. They're publicly traded. They have hundreds of actual Bitcoin ATMs throughout Western Canada, and they give one-on-one service to help you get involved in digital currencies, whether on a small scale like me, or on a larger scale, of course, or corporate accounts. So check them out, bitcoinwell.com. They are a great sponsor. Now, let's get on to a policy that kind of slid under the radar, and I want to talk some more about it because they kind of quietly got rid of that with the traffic courts. And Charlie Pester, I reached out and he's agreed to come on the show and talk to us a bit about it because this is his specialty, and I've been looking forward to this. So let's bring Charlie into the show here and have a discussion with the kind of almost bizarre government back and forth policy. Hey there, Charlie. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Cory.
So, I mean, I'll just give everybody a recap, though I think most people were aware of it. This went on for a few months. There was a proposal to essentially scrap traffic court, move it all on to some sort of online just payment system with very little means of recourse or appeal and traffic violations. There was a lot of backlash, of course, from a lot of people. And then they have quietly finally just they delayed it, and now it sounds like they've finally gotten rid of it altogether.
Well, we would hope so, but it's been going on for more than a few months. This thing started about 10 years ago, and they tried to swing it through with the provincial government just before the NDP became the government, and then when they got punted and the NDP came in, they tried to swing it through at that time too. The NDP didn't have any part of it. So it just kind of sat there, and then they pushed it again with this government, and they decided to bite during the middle of COVID. And so it was really hard to get traction out of the public until very recently. And oh boy, did the public ever catch on quick, though. And so I think that's what was the big factor was the public were just screaming and put an end to this thing. So
yeah, well, and as you said, when a government keeps trying on something, I mean, often they back off, but it doesn't mean they're done with it. They might be looking for another way. So we want to be aware of what happened. And I get frustrated. I mean, when they talk about rights, so some things are just trivial here and there. Well, traffic offenses can very seriously impact somebody's life. And you should have every right to defend yourself, at least if anything's been laid against you.
Yeah, traffic court is really the majority of the public. If they ever have any involvement or interaction with the court system, it is generally through the traffic court system. And so this would have put a really sour taste in people's mouths. And so it's nice that it's gone. From a personal note, it's nice that it's gone, and I think. For the public in general in Calgary or in Alberta and actually across the country, because I have no doubt if this thing flew here, other provinces would have jumped on board and tried to do a similar kind of thing. So
it's unfortunate. It seems that the only times the government wants to streamline and pursue more efficiency is when it's taking away our personal rights and abilities for ourselves. It's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, exactly. And don't forget, it would line their pockets quite nicely. And the insurance companies were frankly licking their lips on this thing. This would have been just a crazy amount of money for them. So,
well, that's it. And that's some of what happens. I mean, particularly if you have moving violations, things like that, your insurance rates as those inclined to speeding and things such and now and then, we know that our rates are going to go high very quickly, and it inspires us to fight back on some of these offenses at times. If you didn't have that ability, I'd imagine there's going to be a lot more convictions and a lot more raising of insurance rates on people then.
Oh, absolutely. And the convictions would have been at far worse tickets as well, or far worse charges with far more implications on insurance. Transportation companies would have been severely hit on things like CVOR and CCMTA and things like that. So,
yeah, and that's a good point, and that's kind of your specialty. Like, just because a person goes to court, of course, doesn't mean they're going to win, and it doesn't mean they'll throw out the entire offense. But perhaps you could appeal to the justice and have your ticket reduced or made into a less onerous penalty if they felt that you were genuinely remorseful and wouldn't do it again.
Exactly. Yeah. And this had no opportunity for that whatsoever. This was pure and simple a conviction factory, and that's what it was from the get-go. It was quite clear by some of the comments when a prosecutor asked one of the originators of this what happens with the innocent people, and their response was, who cares, it's only money. So that really clarified what this was all about right from the start. So.
Yeah, well, and most of us aren't in a position to be able to say it's only money. I wish it were so.
Yeah.
And it's very serious. I mean, we're in some bad inflationary times. Actually, a side note, I didn't anticipate, but Cheryl Dawn, one of our commenters, has asked, there's a backlog.
Sorry, let me just send, there's somebody bugging me, and I'm going to send him a message to...
Sure, and while you're working on that, but I'll talk about that as well. I'm wondering about, as Charlie works on that, as things have been going for a while now, with COVID, a lot of stuff got backed up, whether it's medical procedures or courts.
Yeah,
we've seen that even in courts. And,
sure.
and
What actually happened is they let go a lot of the people that were involved in the court system. They frankly told the clerks, in essence, that, well, you're not wanted, so go find other work. So a lot of them did. In Calgary, they had 22 clerks and office staff in traffic court, and right now they're down to 7. So that gives you an example of the kind of stuff that went on. They had prosecutors leaving because, frankly, they knew they had a pretty good idea what was coming. So yes, some of the delay was due to COVID, but that's no longer the case. The delay right now is manpower. It's as simple as that. They don't have the people that they used to have prior to COVID, and now they're going to have to try to play catch up. And I don't know what the plan is on that. Whether they plan on rehiring people, bringing people back, or whatever. So,
yeah, would they extend deadlines on tickets then that got backed up because of these sorts of things, or because of short staffing? Because I know often, you only have a certain period of time.
Well, we'll see how that plays out. I mean, frankly, they're setting dates right now that are outside the 18 months to begin with, or just off the bat. So, and that's a manpower issue that they will have to address, because they didn't think they were going to have to address it, because they thought it was going to be full steam ahead on this thing, because the public their attention wasn't drawn to this. And now it's off the plate, or at least it seems to be off the plate in any event. So,
yeah, well, I mean, of course, we got a government that's in retreat on a number of public levels, I guess you could say. So now is a good time for them to be receptive to public ire, because they're kind of got their own internal squabbles going. So they're trying to avoid ticking people off any more than they have to. But I mean, that's an unfortunate reason to get rid of a bad policy. It should be for our sake, not for their own expediencies.
Yeah, and it's going to be an interesting time with the provincial government in this province, needless to say. So,
yeah, well, and I mean, justice doesn't come cheap. I mean, sure, you've got to set up a court, you have to have a process and things like that, but that is what we pay taxes for, and we should have those protections, no matter how trivial the offense may feel to some. They're all important to all of us.
Oh, well, the traffic court is not a money loser. Don't kid yourself. The government in no way loses money in traffic court when you consider the amounts of money that come in through the traffic court system per se. And don't forget, this was not a move just for traffic court. This was basically a move to take away the right to a fair trial and the right to be considered innocent until proven guilty from all provincial offenses, not just traffic. They were going for everything. So, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't going to stop there. They would have tried to trim off some of the more minor criminal offenses as well, in all likelihood, at the end of the day. So,
yeah, no, they when they get a hold of our rights, they don't often give them back very easily or willingly. Yeah. But I appreciate you coming in to kind of lay out and clarify a bit of some of that importance. And I'm sure you'll be watching this issue closely still, as we said, the government, you never know if they're going to try it again through a different means in the future. So where can people keep track of what you're doing and find out about yourself?
Well, when we hear about things, we try to get the attention of the the public and the media, and I think now the media is really latched on to this, so I don't think that problem will be as tough as it was before. So, and I just want to thank the media for all the coverage it has been given over the last month or two. Okay.
All right. Well, that's much appreciated. And yeah, no problem. We cover things when we feel the government hasn't been treating us well. That's part of our job out there. So maybe they'll have learned from it, though it's rare occasions when they do. So
thanks, Cory. Thanks,
right,
thanks for having me.
Yeah,
See
and
you.
we'll talk again down the road. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Right. So yes, that was Charlie Pester from Points is the name of his company, and their specialty is again helping people in navigating the traffic courts and things like that. And this was, I really think, a bigger issue than a lot of people realized on what had happened. You know, but kind of like Tracy is saying, yeah, they'll take the rights away little by little by little, and it's true. And the fact that the government would even think that they can just step in and sweep that right to defend yourself aside is really troublesome. It shows how indifferent they are to our rights and how disconnected they are from us and how it impacts us. Like, again, if you've got hey, every traffic ticket I've gotten, I've got to admit, I've never wrongly gotten a traffic ticket before. I always actually was speeding. I always actually did roll that stop sign or whatever I might have gotten over the years. I don't believe I should have been, let off the hook. I think there were a few that were in some bad fishing holes, perhaps, where it wasn't, they were looking to write tickets to make money rather than reduce traffic hazards. But I did know the limit and I got it. But all the same, not everybody, a couple of things, not everybody is necessarily guilty. I mean, an officer can screw up, equipment can screw up, circumstances can change, things happen. And you need the ability to get in and defend yourself in those cases. And if you're a person who drives for a living, like I make no secret of it, I drive Uber still once a week. I like getting out. I get out Friday nights, usually drive around. I get to talk to a lot of interesting people and I get a really good broad outlook, actually. I really like driving Uber still, even, it's just a good thing for me. But I need a class 4 license for it. I can only get a couple of tickets. And then I don't qualify for Uber anymore. If I only have a couple tickets, it's a different standard than regular drivers. I mean, it wouldn't be the end of the world for me. I work here full time at the Standard. But now for other Uber drivers and so on, these aren't high income guys and women. These are people, working hard, making bucks out there like taxi drivers and such. But a couple of tickets, they could lose their line of work. This is very, very serious. I mean, again, if you're doing that for a living, you should be careful with your driving. Absolutely. But you got to look at how much impact that is having on some low income people. They could lose their job. Or if you look at other low income people, insurance rates, as we said, you get too many tickets, they shoot through the roof. And people say, oh, again, it's your own fault. You got the tickets. That's fair enough. But you should have the right, if the penalties can be that direct and that extreme upon yourself, you should at least have the ability to defend yourself. I mean, if it's a chronic speeder, lunatic driver, dangerous driver, they're going to lose their license. That's fine, but they're not going to win it in court. But to have the government think they could just take that away and put it into the hands of an adjudicator and basically make you guilty until proven innocent. This is not cool, guys. And as was said by the other commenter, when you start, with the little bits of rights, they're going to expand further. How far will it get? Will it get to petty crimes, shoplifting, things like that? And again, I don't have much sympathy for shoplifters, but innocent people get accused of things. That's why we have courts. You have to have courts. Even if the charge is small, you have to give the person the ability. And the government didn't think they had to. The only reason they backed off on that was because we pushed back, because we said we're not going to put up with it. June asking, late to the party news about Randy Hillier. Yeah, he's been taken into police custody, I believe. At this point, what's going to happen next, I don't know. He brought himself in, voluntarily, and I believe he's been formally charged. I don't know if that leads to further arrests or like a formal arrest or incarceration, or if they'll just take him before a justice and then put him out on bail. Though the government's been pretty reticent about bail lately, but it's a significant thing to see an elected official being charged like this. This is quite something. We're watching it very closely. As we can see, he surrendered to the Ottawa police. And we have Matthew out there in Ottawa, one of our prime reporters. I'm certain he's watching that very closely out there. So if anything breaks and anything we learn, again, get to the Western Standard online and you'll be able to find out. So before we get to, and our next guest is still a few minutes away, I might as well talk about the Western Standard itself. I usually do that after the news check-in, just to remind everybody and thank all of you guys who have subscribed to us already. Subscribers are what keep us rolling. That's what keeps us accountable. Hey, if we're putting out bad content, you guys are going to fire us because we'll lose our subscribers and we'll go broke and it'll turn into a little backwater blog. In reality, our subscriptions have been fantastic. That's why we're growing. That's why we're getting reporters across the country, new ones, expanding here in Calgary. And I thank all of you guys who have subscribed already. And if you haven't already subscribed, check it out. Use the coupon code TRIGGERED. Take out a subscription. You get past the paywall. I mean, you heard that news Dave wrote this morning. That's just this morning. I don't know what that was. A dozen stories that have gone up on the site already. And important, good stories, topical. And that's how we can pay for it, is through you guys subscribing. And for $10 a month, it's $99 a year if you take out a whole year, and then $10 off if you use that coupon code TRIGGERED. Free 2-week trial. Oh, listen, I'm giving the whole infomercial, but it's true, and this is how we support ourselves. It's well worth it. Cheaper than an old newspaper subscription used to be, and it keeps us rolling. I mean, as we heard, that association of journalists, and that kind of ties into this other thing too. And this is how sick the legacy media is getting. These guys not even realizing their own wrongdoing. So, as was reported, we've got a recent story. 40 days after the Coastal GasLink attack, those terrorists who attacked it, smashing equipment, assaulting security people, putting a lot of people at terrible risk. 20 people in the night came out and did this. There hasn't been a single arrest. We haven't gotten any updates on what's going on with it. We don't know if they've managed to come close. I mean, I understand that the RCMP, has to be careful and keep some stuff tight with their investigations. But boy, that's one of the areas where there's a lot of trust gets lost with the RCMP often. They're terrible when it comes to communications, really awful. And it frustrates us with them. It reduces trust. So I don't know what's going on up there. But they've been dealing with that mess up with the Coastal GasLink pipeline. That's what those idiot Hollywood celebrities were opposing, by the way, and virtue signaling going on about. It's a gas line. It's been under construction in BC for a couple of years now. It's approved by all 21 First Nations reserves all the way along the line. They've agreed with all of them, but some extreme activists have been fighting it every inch of the way. And a bunch of them locked themselves into this shack they built in the middle of a pipeline. And it literally forced the police to have to chainsaw their way through the door and pull the people out of that shack and arrest them. Well, it turns out 2 of the imbeciles locked in that shack were CBC reporters. They were paid by your tax dollars. They were our employees. And the first thing they did, if you look up those videos, we've played them in the past, is, oh, hey, I'm a journalist. So what? There's being embedded and reporting on something, and there's taking part in something. And yeah, they'd gotten some tax money to film a documentary on these guys, but they weren't just filming them. They were with them. They were participating. They were inside on this thing. Again, we talk about people in Canada getting arrested and held without bail for weeks because they organized bouncy castles and honking horns and annoying politicians in Ottawa. But these guys set up whole blockades on a pipeline. They assault people and they get nothing out of it. And we got some very bad double standards going on right now. But either way, I'm just getting back to shooting at the mainstream media. If I went down there, or any of our reporters, and we were at some sort of protest like this, or anything similar, and got arrested in the process, and whoever was doing it was saying, oh, no, I'm with the Western Standard. Now, I can't necessarily speak for Derek, but I got a sneaking suspicion he'd say, no, you aren't. If you're not down there covering it, you're down there actually taking part in it, you're on your own. Sorry, you exceeded what your limits are as a journalist and what you're going to do. The CBC people didn't do that. And the Association of Journalists dropped the ball as they tried defending these clowns who were taking part in the midst of this protest. What's this Sylvia saying? Just like the reporters that joined a sit-in at a Hutterite colony in Alberta a couple of years ago. Yeah, there's those animal rights people. And, they triggered me a little. I'm still a little sad about having to cull all those chickens last weekend, but all the same, I'm a real softie when it comes to animals. I'm not big on people, but I love the critters. Either way, there is a line between, where journalism and activism. And once it gets crossed, you can't be both. You can have an opinion. I get emails from people all the time. Oh, Cory, you're so biased. Well, yeah, that is my job. I'm an opinion editor, and I have a show where I share my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. And as we know, plenty of people don't agree with my opinions, and that's perfectly fine. That's what it's all about. But that delineation between our reporters and people like me who specialize in opinions has to always be clear. And that's part of why we've been doing great as well. Dave in the newsroom makes it very clear as he's managing the reporters and what's going out that we stick to news, we stick to news coverage, and leave the opinion stuff to blowhards like myself to cover on shows and things like that. And even then, the opinion has lines. I can have my opinion, but I can't go out and join one of those protests and deck out my vehicle and honk horns and so on. Then I'm not really representing much of anything appropriately. So we've got a real problem in Canada going on between what is appropriate journalism and what isn't. I'm going to speak to one of our sponsors before we get on to our next guest here too, and that's the getting back to some rights, I guess, and individuals, and that's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. These guys have been with us for a while. So if you are considering owning a firearm, if you already own firearms, there's a lot of us. We're legal, law-abiding firearms owners. We want to go hunting, you want to go target shooting, you want to collect, whatever, it's your business. As long as you're not harming anyone else, there's not a problem. But unfortunately, our government often does have a problem with that, and they constantly keep changing, like hunting rifles and things such as that, recategorizing them, turning you from a law-abiding firearm owner into suddenly a criminal, and then they take your property away. And yes, they say they'll buy it back, but hey, if you are being forced to give it away, that's not a sale, that's still a theft. These guys are standing up for you. They have multiple court challenges out on your behalf as a firearm owner against the Liberal government on those recategorizations and seizures. But they need your help. They're like everything else. You've got to join them. You got to get on there, take out a membership with them. That's how they can afford to keep these fights up. Because if you don't fight back, they'll take it away. It's like we talked about with the traffic tickets and things such as that as well. The only reason the government backed off was because of public pressure. You got to keep the pressure up. The Canadian Shooting Sports Association, they're helping keep that pressure up on your behalf. And they have other resources as well. They have videos on safe firearm use. They have links to trade shows and events, things such as that. So check them out. Canadian Shooting Association. It's CSSA-CILA.org. It's probably easiest just to Google them out, though. Canadian Shooting Association, you can't miss them. They're a great organization. They're out to help you and keep your property safe so you can continue to enjoy it. All right. And I see Dave in the lobby. It looks like he's almost set to come in there. So maybe we're going to bring Dave Bradley in from Bitcoinwell and have a discussion about some policies that just got released. So, hey, you got her all set up, or still kind of bouncing around a bit there? Right on. Good to see you, Dave.
Good to see you, Cory.
So yeah, this was a bit rushed, but we saw something that was unusual. We got a conservative candidate with Pierre Poilievre putting out a release very directly addressing digital currencies and mentioning Bitcoin in itself during that release. Did you have a chance to read that yet?
Yeah, I had a look at it. Kind of circulated around the Bitcoin community in the last 12 hours or so, and there's some interesting stuff in there for sure.
Yeah, and I read it. So, I mean, one of the things he addressed, and again, this is just so unusual for a political race to see this sort of thing come up, but it kind of shows how important digital currencies are becoming. But he speaks along the lines of keeping cryptocurrencies and digital currencies legal. Like, is there much threat that they're going to be illegalized?
I wouldn't say there is in Canada right now. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are regulated by FINTRAC, an arm of the federal government right now. And there's also some crossover with securities regulations, which is regulated by the provinces at the moment. But we haven't seen like a large scale crackdown like we've seen in some countries like China, where China's banned Bitcoin a dozen times at this point, and the future for Bitcoin in China is very uncertain. That said, we also haven't seen openly positive regulations or policy come forward the way that we've seen in some other countries like El Salvador, which made Bitcoin legal tender.
Yeah, that was an unusual, step. How's that been going in El Salvador? I think we kind of briefly mentioned that before, but it's still developing, right?
Yeah, it's still really developing. The big step that they took, which notably was not mentioned in the release that he put out, was they made Bitcoin legal tender. So basically, as far as the government of El Salvador is concerned, you have to accept Bitcoin in El Salvador just like you do their other currency. So he stopped short of that. That's something that I would like to see, is Bitcoin being considered legal tender, or at least a foreign currency like you would with the US dollar or something like that. But Yeah, it's still very new in El Salvador, but what we do know is that it's attracting a lot of investment. It's attracting a lot of people in the industry to Bitcoin, and I'd love to see Canada go in that direction as well.
Yeah. So another part of Mr. Poilievre's release, he talked about making the rules more clear with digital currencies and such. He didn't quite go into detail though. Which rules do you need clarity, or do they need clarity? Is he addressing a valid issue there?
Well, one of the things that he mentioned, like I said, was the securities regulations, and right now those are regulated by the province. Most provinces actually don't really have much of an involvement in how that regulation is taking place, but we've seen Ontario, BC, Quebec, and Ontario, BC, Quebec, and Alberta all taking a somewhat cautious but active role in regulating that stuff. And there's a risk right now that we end up with kind of a different treatment from province to province, and that probably is less than ideal.
Yeah, I mean that would be difficult for federalism in general. I mean, if you had something that's considered a valid currency in one province and you can't utilize it in the next, there's going to be issues. So I guess it was good addressing. I mean, if we get 10 different regulations across Canada, it's going to be difficult for currencies in general. So I guess that would be part of what spurred him. You need a national initiative to pull that together then.
Yeah, I think a national initiative would be good. There's a lot of cautiousness coming from Bitcoiners because we're very as a group, I would say, not entirely trusting of the government, whether it's Pierre or the current Liberal government or whoever else it may be. It would be very easy to get this wrong and end up over-regulating and stifling that kind of innovation that we're seeing out of places like El Salvador.
Well, that's part of what it was also in his release, was talking about, making sure there was uniform things for the sake of taxation and other levels. I mean, if it does eventually get turned into fully like any other currency, then it'll lose most of its advantages it had in the first place.
Well, in some ways it would. Right now it's taxed like an asset, which can create some kind of unnecessary bookkeeping paperwork if you're doing small transactions. So it would be really nice to see it treated from a tax perspective, just like any other foreign currency. So that would definitely be a positive. But yeah, I think that doing less is more in this case. And we just like to see, when I say we, I think most Bitcoiners would like to see as much as possible a hands-off approach to let people use whatever currency they want and let innovation flourish.
Yeah, and as a libertarian-minded individual, I can't agree with you more on that. And as far as I'm concerned, the more the merrier. Let the better currencies rise to the top is the way to go with it. But I mean, I guess we are a civilized society. There's a degree of regulation. It'll always be that push and pull. Or what's that minimal regulation required? What about that? This just as a side note, it wasn't so much out of Mr. Poilievre, but it's a question a lot of my commenters asked and things before. But people's Bitcoin, if it was in their cold wallet and such, I mean, was still completely secure despite some of the recent actions of the government when they were seizing things. Like there was a myth that the government could get into and take some of those assets, but they had no access to those at any time, right?
Yeah, it's a lot harder because you can very easily self-custody your Bitcoin. So this is something that has some basis in history, where at one time the dominant money in the world was gold, and then the U.S. At some point about a century ago decided that they no longer wanted to allow people to hold their wealth in gold, and they started confiscating gold. And that there's definitely a worry of that coming from the federal government. So I want to make sure that if possible, there's no infringements on people's rights to hold and store their wealth however they'd like to do. So that's a big thing. That goes back also to censorship resistance, which is a key feature of Bitcoin. We saw that with the whole trucker protests, and they were trying essentially to seize Bitcoins that they actually had no physical access to, and therefore were not allowed to seize it. And then the other area is sort of that store of wealth that we've talked about before, right? Where that is something that getting a positive law on the books could protect for the long term. So right now, one of the main ways that the current government is taxing us is kind of an underhanded way of doing it is through inflation, right? So we've seen unprecedented spending out of this government, and all of that has been funded by unprecedented money printing. And what that means is that if you're sitting on dollars, they definitely will buy you a lot less than they would 2 years ago before this crazy money spending spree started. And putting Bitcoin legally on the books in Canada would allow people a long-term right to continue to store their wealth in Bitcoin like that. And I think that's probably the single most important thing that we could get out of further regulation.
Yeah, and that's been an ongoing thing as it's still so relatively new, and more people can feel safe and secure in it. I there's something of an irony where government regulation would make them feel safer. Depends on your mindset. Government regulation tends to make me fearful, but I mean, I understand there's a need for some degree of laws and controls on things, and it could help develop the digital currencies altogether in general if we could get a stable system for it, I guess.
Yeah, and in some ways, the best thing that they can do is to offer some assurance that there aren't more restrictive regulations coming down in the future. And passing a law, most of the regulation that has happened in Bitcoin thus far has been happening at the policy level through groups like the Securities Commissions and through FinTrack. And having a law actually on the books that makes it specifically legal and allows people the right to hold their own Bitcoin would at least give a little bit more certainty that we're not going to have another government come in and try to confiscate people's Bitcoins or control how they want to use or spend those Bitcoins.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're in for some interesting times as always, and it's been fantastic. And this is just developing so fast; it's a fluid thing. But I just really found it striking when, again, I never would have imagined we'd hear a federal candidate for a major party talking about bringing in these kinds of legislations and addressing them, which I imagine is going to make other candidates and perhaps even the Liberals follow suit. So I think overall it's got to be a good development. I mean, it's bringing a discussion up that nobody really was talking about, and hopefully we can bring our better minds together and come up with a good, stable policy in the long run out of it. Yeah,
I'm not super surprised to see him come out with this release. I know that he's been a Bitcoiner for a while. That was something I was hoping you would ask him when he was on the show here, but he's been saying a lot of the same stuff that we talk about in the Bitcoin community, and his whole banging the drum on inflation over the last year, I think largely stems from an understanding that our money is being eroded, and that is really the problem that Bitcoin solves. And on top of that, I think Bitcoiners as a group are growing rapidly, and we're probably pretty close to single issue voters. For me, having control over my own money is probably the single most important thing that any government could do, and any attempt to take that away would be a massive negative. So I'm not super surprised to see that. I think we're probably going to see, to your point, a lot more. We're seeing that around the world, that politicians are starting to see Bitcoiners as a constituency that they want to look at, and that's evidenced by there's probably at least a dozen U.S. senatorial candidates running with pro-Bitcoin platforms, and we've seen places like Miami where the mayor of Bitcoin is very openly pro-Bitcoin, and that's brought a lot of business to the city. And so I think that that kind of stuff is just going to continue to increase.
Great. Well, it's going to be a long race with this one. I'm going to be having Mr. Poilievre on again probably before September 10th when that ends, maybe even a couple times. So I'll be sure to ask. And I'm going to be speaking to Leslyn Lewis tomorrow morning as well. So this will be a new question on my list to ask her to respond to that. And we'll keep that discussion going. So thanks for coming on, though, to talk and explain a bit about that to us. Again, it's a nebulous world. Actually, if you got a moment for one more question. From Cheryl Dawn, she's asking, I hear that from a number of people. This is just outside of the policy thing, but what happens if if you have your resources, the energy grid goes down, where the fearful bad times are happening, and you have no internet? How can you access your assets? Yeah, transacting on the Bitcoin network in the absence of a large, reliable power grid is impossible in the long term. But that's also true for our legacy financial system. Most of our money right now is digital. And I think that if we ended up in a situation like that, where there's no internet, there's no power, like we saw recently in Kazakhstan, people are going to run into a lot bigger problems than just how to spend their Bitcoin. And I think that this issue gets brought up a lot, especially from people who sort of view gold and silver as the hedges to that kind of a meltdown. And I don't really think that that's a major problem that we need to consider, because if the world really changed that way and there was no power grid and there was no internet and we weren't confident that they were coming back in a short amount of time, we would probably end up using something completely different that we don't even expect as money. It'd be something like bullets or cans of beans or something that can be used on a day-to-day basis. And I don't think that Bitcoin or gold would be the currency that we would use in a Mad Max meltdown. Yeah, no, and we'll just hope things don't fall apart that badly. I have mentioned before on the show, I live on an acreage, and I'm a terrible gardener. I found that out, but I'm not too bad with my firearms. So if the zombie apocalypse comes, I might just go for my neighbor's garden rather than my own. But Bitcoin or gold won't be what the priorities will be at that point. But let's hope we just don't end up there. So
Yeah,
great.
absolutely.
Thanks for answering all that, Dave, and I appreciate it. Again, it's just digital currencies are such a big growing world, and we're still kind of learning as we go here. So yeah, I hope I can talk to you again on the show soon. Are we frozen? I think Mr. Bradley may have frozen up a little bit there. So I was just kind of closing up with Mr. Bradley at the end of the interview there anyways. So I don't know if he can hear me or not, but I think we got through what we need to. And we do have the next guest, David Krayden, in the lobby. So we will pull him in there and have a talk with him. David Krayden's our new senior parliamentary columnist, and he's been prolific in writing a bunch of great stuff on the Western Standard already in this last few weeks. So let's bring Mr. Krayden in and have a talk. Hey there, how's it going? Oh, looks like we got a triple view going on. We just got the technical glitches of a live broadcast. Oh, I think you might be muted there, David. Perhaps? Yes, you are. See if I can.
Okay, we're on here.
There we go. There's one of the things I'm looking forward to in the end of the COVID world and all that with all of those. Can you hear me yet? Can you hear me yet? Things
Yeah.
that are going to haunt us for some time yet. So thank you for joining me on the show, though. It's the first time we've had you on here, and kind of a belated welcome to the Western Standard family.
Well, it's very nice to be here, Cory. Thank you for having me on.
So in joining on with us and writing all that stuff, as I said, you've been quite prolific. Our federal government has been generous enough to give you lots and lots of things to write about. You're never hard pressed for stories. Maybe we'll just kind of go backwards on some of your more recent stuff on the ongoing persecution of the convoy organizers.
Well, I'm just absolutely disgusted with what's been happening with the ongoing persecution of these political criminals, and that's exactly what's going on here. And I blame Justin Trudeau for setting the standard here, which is one of the lowest standards I've ever seen in any democracy. And this might be the Ottawa police going mad, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're acting like Gestapo agents and all this, going after people who had a peaceful protest and parked their trucks on Wellington Street, and they're treating them worse than murderers and rapists. And it's ridiculous because, as we all know, during COVID, across North America, we were letting out rapists and murderers on the streets because it was deemed too dangerous to keep these people in prison. And yet we're talking about prison sentences for people who were peacefully protesting insane COVID vaccine mandates. And now we have an MPP. In fact, he's my MPP. Randy Hillier is facing jail time because they say he attacked a police officer. I mean, this is outrageous. This is absolutely outrageous. And Justin Trudeau goes to Europe, talks to the European Parliament about how much he adores democracy. And he just seems to have no sense of even the irony of this. And never mind the fact he has no sense of decency, no sense of even basic goodness. He goes to Europe and preaches democracy and just seems to think people should be applauding him. And of course, he had the backlash. Thank God for that, because they're not that stupid over there that he can get away with this sort of nonsense. And I'm glad he got a face full of it for doing this, because he really is one of the most hypocritical men I've ever seen. Much, much worse than his father in all ways, and much, much, much more stupid than his father ever was. At least his father had a brain and two wits to rub together. The son has nothing but stupidity. Mr. Blackface going on and on about racism in Canada and what a terrible sin it is, and he's the worst person to commit that sin. And he's always going on self-righteously about how Canadians are terrible racists, and how it's everybody else's problem, but never his own, and how Canadians don't respect democracy. and he's the worst person to do that. And it just, I'm really disgusted at how he handled the Freedom Convoy. It's just absolutely galling, and he's constantly embarrassing this country on the world stage. Just he embarrasses himself on the national stage.
Well, that's part of it. We get to see him unvarnished when he goes overseas. He doesn't have his protective Ottawa press gallery there to throw him softball questions at every conference. He doesn't have a parliament dominated by Liberal members. And I mean, at the European Union Parliament, I mean, the ones who wanted to be polite just left and didn't hang around while he spoke. And then others called him out solidly in ways we would never see in Canada. I mean, he would never be eviscerated publicly as he did when he went over there. I mean, I think it was kind of a good dressing down, yet embarrassing to us as Canadians as a whole at the same time.
Well, you don't really, in your heart of hearts, want to see your prime minister called, a threat to democracy when they go overseas. It's not really what you want to see as a Canadian. You want your prime minister to go overseas and to be at least respected. And of course, Trudeau really isn't respected. He's really seen as a dictatorial force and as a buffoon by some, because he really acts like a buffoon at times. And it's all there for the world to see. He has acted like a buffoon, and he's acted like a dictator. And that's really not good for the country. And it really isn't. But of course, the United States is seeing the same thing with Joe Biden when he goes overseas. And I don't think it's any accident that the two of them appeared together so many times in photo ops at the NATO conference. They seem to get along just fine together. They seem to be two peas in a pod. Because they really are very much alike. They not only seem to go off script quite a bit together and say the same sorts of things, but they both like to demonize their political enemies, just like Joe Biden demonizes his political enemies as a bunch of white supremacists and neo Jim Crow people. Justin Trudeau likes to demonize his political enemy as a bunch of Nazis and white supremacists. So they have a lot in common. They both like to dismiss their political enemies as extremists. And it's quite worrisome, because they don't like to engage in rational political debate and to actually address their political enemies or their political opponents. They like to talk about enemies all the time. They don't like to talk about political opponents or to engage in rational political debate. That seems to be lost in Canada and the US, unfortunately.
Well, and it's the vindictive tone that's getting concerning right now. Like the convoys have been dismantled for weeks and weeks now. Things are calmed down. We're getting a lot of Senate committees and others looking in and finding out that a lot of the justifications used to act against them, whether it was the supposed firearms that Justin Ling made up or the foreign funding, the Russian info, no, all that's falling apart. That narrative is falling apart. But instead of even just quietly letting it go and trying to move on with government business, they still seem determined to crack down ever harder. They're laying even more charges against Tamara Leach, who's clearly a harmless, accidental activist almost out in Medicine Hat. And they are not letting up. They want to go after everybody involved with this and punish them by all means.
Well, yeah, as I wrote the other day, I mean, the OPP appeared before a parliamentary committee and said that the Freedom Convoy was a national security threat. Based on what? They had never had any evidence that the Freedom Convoy was harboring firearms or bombs or what, nuclear devices. And this is absolute nonsense. And now, of course, that we know they never even had a gun in their possession, has Trudeau come out and said, I really want to apologize for being a part of these rumors that the Freedom Convoy constituted a national security threat? Has the police come out? Has this firebrand interim police chief come out and apologized for saying, no, they really pose no threat to public safety? No, he's gone crazy, arresting people, piling up the charges. He's gone the other way, when in fact they should be apologizing for going crazy and cracking skulls and going nuts against the Freedom Convoy people for no reason at all.
Well, and he does seem to be incapable of contrition. Like, hey, we all did. Well, I won't speak for you. I guess I did a lot of stupid things through my 20s and 30s. I'm glad there wasn't digital cameras everywhere back in those times. I never danced around chronically in blackface as Justin did, but I'm sure there's a few things I wouldn't have wanted to be exposed today. But if it came up or something like that, I would say, look, I was drunk. I was stupid. I'm sorry. But Justin, when he does it, says, we all need to learn from this. We all made this mistake. Like, he just can't own anything he's done. I can respect a person who makes mistakes if they will at least admit it, but he's never done that.
No, he's never wrong. In fact, if I recall, he blamed everybody. He blamed Montreal for his blackface. He blamed everybody else. He says, it's because I grew up in a racist city that I did blackface. And he couldn't even say that mea culpa. He doesn't know the meaning of that word, and he certainly would never use it because he's never to blame for any of his actions.
So, getting further and deeper down our rabbit hole, you wrote on the Liberal NDP alliance and partnership. I mean, it's not a formal coalition government. We don't have Singh and some members in cabinet or anything, but this is pretty tight and pretty integrated. Do you think that this is going to last, though, all the way until 2025?
Well, I find it difficult to believe. I think, I have nothing but contempt for Jagmeet Singh because he's one of these, what George Orwell used to describe as parlor Bolsheviks, and what I call today is jacuzzi Marxists. He's one of these elites who sit around in their jacuzzis talking about the revolution, and they have no idea what working class people actually are because they never rub shoulders with them. They're part of the elite, and they really have never seen a working class person. And if they do, they have nothing but contempt for them because they consider them deplorables like Hillary Clinton does. And Jagmeet Singh thinks he's getting a great deal here because he's got this minimal number of MPs, and here's his chance to be the deputy prime minister, essentially. I really know that half of his caucus at least can't stand him anymore because they're really old style NDPers who really do have some affection for working class people. And they know Jagmeet Singh doesn't. And they know this is nothing but a power grab. And they know they didn't like the Emergencies Act. And they know their conscience really didn't want them to vote for it. And I don't think they're going to last 3 years with Justin Trudeau. And I go back to 1972, 50 years ago, when David Lewis did actually sign a coalition deal with Pierre Trudeau, Justin's father. And it destroyed David Lewis and the NDP in 1974 when Trudeau walked away with a majority government. And because people said, well, what the heck is the difference between the NDP and the Liberals? And this is exactly what's going to happen in the next election if Singh stays tight with Trudeau. People are going to say, well, what's the difference? Because people are already saying that. What's the difference between the Liberals and the NDP? There's really no difference at all. Because Justin Trudeau has taken the party so far to the left that there really is no philosophical or ideological difference between these two parties. And Singh has essentially said that. Singh wants his cake and he wants to eat it too. He wants a coalition government, but not in name. He wants to pretend to be still in opposition, but he wants to be part of the government. And that's a cop-out. That is just an absolute cop-out. He might as well be saying this is a coalition government instead of wanting it both ways. And it's a recipe for disaster, which I said it's an easy fit, but it's a coalition from hell. It is really what it is.
Yeah, well, and the NDP kind of federally has two roles, in my view. I mean, one is, I guess, to try and get in and hope that they can get into a situation like this where they can get as many, policies pushed through as possible, farther left than typically would have been. But the other part's to be the left-wing voice of conscience. You're an opposition and you accept that. And in things like imposing the Emergencies Act that I don't think some classic NDP leaders and supporters would want to have supported, they're going to have a hard time, as you said, carrying on supporting, even if the parties seem indistinguishable from each other, but the memberships are quite different.
Well, what really scares the hell out of me of this deal is not the pharmacare and the dental care, which does scare me because I don't think most Liberals voted for more socialism. I think a lot of them did, but I don't think a lot of them did. But what scares me is that both of these men, Singh and Trudeau, are authoritarians. They are hardcore authoritarians, which the Emergencies Act showed. Singh was just rejoicing about this. You could just see he didn't have a care in the world about supporting Justin Trudeau with the Emergencies Act. A lot of NDPers did. You could see when they stood up to speak about it, largely those with the gray hair. You know, the old style NDPers, you could see them saying, I don't want to vote for this. I don't feel comfortable with this. Singh was just ecstatic about it. Yeah, let's go after these working class people, these deplorables out there in the street. Who the heck do they think they are? You could just see the anger. You could see him saying, let's nail them to the wall, because he's an authoritarian. And I really am worried about these two authoritarian junkies getting together and running the country, because I think they're going to do a lot of harm. Because Trudeau and Singh both have enemies lists. They like to go after conservatives and libertarians. They like to go after people who don't agree with them ideologically and politically. And I think together, Trudeau and his straight man, as I call Singh, I think they're going to do a lot of damage to this country.
Yeah, well, and they're not exactly a cerebral pair even between the two of them. So they combine forces. It's not likely that something good is going to come of it. So going forward, though, we've got it looks like it's going to be a lively parliamentary session in summer coming. We got the Conservative leadership race going on. Maybe going out. Do you have any thoughts on the lineup so far and how that race is developing?
I'm glad we got to this, because I have been following conservative races since I was 12 years old, believe it or not. Yeah, since the first one I followed was Joe Clark's. I have a lot of concern about this one. I'm not understanding why we've got so many people in this race right now, and I'm not understanding why Jean Charest is here. I mean, what on earth is Jean Charest doing in this race? I didn't even know Jean Charest was still interested in politics, and he just reappears out of nowhere. And I don't understand why he even thinks he should be in this race. What we need in this race is a clear conservative. Jean Charest is not that man. He is clearly a liberal. He always has been. And I don't think there's anybody in this race that's clearly a conservative who can win except Pierre Poilievre. I've known Pierre Poilievre since he was, and believe it or not, yes, and this is very true, since he was a volunteer for Ezra Levant's campaign as an MP in Calgary. And I've known him that long. And I really think the Conservative Party needs a conservative leader, because we haven't had one for quite a while. And if we do not have a clear Conservative Party in this country, we're going to have three political parties that continue to be liberal parties. And that's what we've had for far too long. And I don't understand why we've got MPs supporting people like Patrick Brown, who once again is not a conservative. He was a horrible leader of the provincial party, and I don't know what he's doing in this race either. We've got other good people in this race, but clearly are not going to win. I think I would like to see Maxime Bernier in this race. I really would like to see Maxime back in the federal party. I know Maxime very well, and I admire what he's trying to do with the People's Party of Canada. But I would like to see him back in the federal party, because we need a strong federal party. And if we don't see a conservative leading this party, I think anything is up for grabs in that case. But we need a conservative to lead the Conservative Party. There's no question about that. And right now, I don't see any alternative except for Pierre Poilievre doing that. And he's certainly the most credible candidate. And once again, where are some of these people popping up? It's very, very odd to me that Jean Charest came out of nowhere. And I don't know why. I thought he was completely a forgotten man in Canadian politics. But
yeah, Well, and he can't be underestimated. I mean, I was as surprised as you when the name came up. I thought, that was a voice from the past. I know he's still around, but I wouldn't have thought he'd make another go for the big chair. But I mean, he came on. We had him on the show. I think it was last week, maybe the week before. And he's an unapologetic liberal, as far as I would put it that way. He doesn't, as opposed to O'Toole, who was a closet liberal. But he's going to garner a certain degree of that vote. There is a risk he might end up be the leader of that party. It's going to be an interesting race to watch.
Well, I'm most disappointed with people out there who say we have to elect Jean Charest because he can win. And I'm saying, win what? He's going to be another liberal leader, and we're going to elect another liberal government, because that's all it's going to amount to. Because it's not going to be any different than Justin Trudeau's government if we have Jean Charest in charge. He's already said he's going to have a carbon tax. He's going to have the same gun control measures. He's going to do the same things that Justin Trudeau is doing. So what is the point? If we have Jean Charest, I will be supporting the People's Party of Canada, because what's the point? It is absolutely ridiculous to say that we need a liberal to win, because that's exactly what we've done in the past. We say, well, conservatives will vote conservative because they have no other option. No, conservatives stay home, or they'll vote for a third party or fourth party. And that is completely a fallacy to say that conservatives can somehow be forced to vote for a liberal leader because they have no other option, because they have no other choice. No, they just stay home. They don't vote. And we need to rally around a positive conservatism, and that has to happen. But I mean, I have been around politics for so long. I tend to be cynical about these things. I know what happens. I know that I know power politics, and I know sometimes we allow the forces of power to usurp the forces of principle, and that's unfortunately what happens in many cases. But I think we as journalists have got to keep printing the facts and the truth, and we cannot allow ourselves to be controlled by the forces out there of power that want us to become part of that process.
Well, and that we certainly don't at the Western Standard. That's something we always pride ourselves on. So thank you very much for joining me today and adding all that. That's a kind of a good note to close on. And we know we can find your stuff on the Western Standard. Do you have another site? And are you working on some stuff right now?
Well, I am, because I'm concerned. In fact, I'm very concerned right now that I'm hearing the same stuff about another COVID wave coming, that the forces of lockdown and put those masks back on and get a fourth or fifth booster shot are at work again. And we have to be very vigilant that we're not going to go back into another horrendous lockdown because we are in an economic crisis right now, produced by 2 years of COVID, the inflation produced by the Biden administration south of the border, and the bad policies in this country, and by the war in Ukraine, which is fueling famine across the world right now, in addition to disastrous economic consequences. We cannot afford any more disastrous economic policies. So we don't need any more lockdowns, and we don't need any more bad economic policies. So I think we have to be on guard for that right now.
Yeah, well, the battle never stops. It just has its ups and downs. So here's to hoping, though, that maybe we've hit bottom and to start moving into a positive direction somehow soon. So thanks for checking in with us today, David. I hope to have you back again soon to talk some more of these issues.
Would love to, Cory. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks. So that was our senior parliamentary columnist, David Krayden. And as I said, he's been putting a lot of columns out there since coming on board, and they've been well received. You can certainly get a flavor of what Mr. Krayden is about. I'll just answer a couple of commenter questions. I see Pamela Jones-Kenny put a couple out, getting onto the political end of things, asking about the chances of Trudeau stepping down. that one's kind of interesting. You know, I don't think we'll see it happening fast if it's going to happen, but it's not impossible. Like there's a lot of ambitious liberals hiding in that caucus. They are not liking Justin. They want to climb the ladder. They think it's time for a new leader. And I tell you what, liberals are ruthless. I mean, those guys play political hardball. And if they can find the cracks, we saw some of it just before the Emergencies Act was getting imposed, they will tear him down. But we'll see. And it really depends on the liberal support numbers. If the liberal support numbers are getting bad, if they're looking ugly within a year and some from now, you see the timeline they're going to look at is the next federal election. You can't go, I mean, in a minority government, you can never count on it for sure. But if they think they can pull him out and replace him and entrench somebody who can win the next election in time, they'll do it. But at this point with this coalition, or alliance, I should say, I think they're going to leave it alone from within for a while and see what irons out. And he's probably got some fires to put out from the Emergencies Act already. Also, he asked about Michelle Rempel-Garner backing Roman. I think Michelle Rempel-Garner's been behind Patrick Brown, actually. I think she got involved in his campaign as his campaign chair. And Patrick Brown is an interesting one, a bit of a red Tory. Yet, one thing to give Brown, I'm hoping to get him on the show as well. He was actually outspoken early when he was the mayor of Brampton on health issues that other politicians wouldn't touch. He was taking the Ontario Health Authority to task because of their miscategorization of COVID deaths. And nobody else was doing that. No politicians were doing that. We were all on here on the shows and online and alternative media, but not politicians. And he was saying, hey, give us the numbers of how many people died with COVID versus of COVID, because that's been a huge question all the way through that people still aren't answering. And it's hard to give accurate numbers. Was it somebody who came in with an inoperable heart condition who was really going to die within 3 days no matter what and happened to test positive of COVID? Or was it somebody that could have had 6 more months of life, 6 more years of life, and COVID finished it off? It's very important to look into those. And to his credit, Patrick Brown was actually one of those digging into that. Aside from that, though, from what I can see, he's a red Tory for the most part. So, I give some credit, I take away. But it's an interesting one to see where that's going to go. Again, as this campaign goes along, there are so many candidates. They just keep popping up. I think we've got 10 of them now. I've got another one, a fellow from Saskatchewan, and forgive me, I've forgotten his name offhand. Again, they're coming up so quickly. He's going to be in studio on Wednesday, and we're going to talk here. And I'll be talking to Leslyn Lewis tomorrow. It won't be live. Again, it's hard to get these candidates live, but I'm going to record that conversation with Dr. Lewis tomorrow morning, and we will run it during the show and go from there. Again, that reminder to everybody just to subscribe on the Western Standard Online. That's what David Krayden was talking about, independent media that's going to cut in there. We're going to ask those questions that local media won't. They're beholden to the government. We rely on sponsors and subscribers. That's all. And it's really important. I don't know if people remember, there's a big article Derek wrote. It was great. He went through all the process. We are an approved. There was a process. There shouldn't even be a process. We are an approved liberal media government source. Doesn't mean we're liberals. It just means that we fell into whatever their weird category is of actually being an outlet. And that meant we qualified for a whole bunch of subsidies. They said, are you ready to apply for the subsidies? And Derek said, no. We just wanted to see if we could. It was a great point of principle to make, to show. And how many other outlets are taking those subsidies? How many others are beholden to the government? Then that's how you pay your lease. That's how you pay your staff. That's how you pay for your equipment. You're kind of afraid to rock the boat. You don't want to shake things up, and you might not do it. And you're going to skip out on some stories that are important. So as Nico was showing, use that coupon code Triggered. You could take out a subscription. That's how you keep us independent. We're not threatening. We'll go broke before, and it's not going to happen. We'll go broke before we take government money. I'm confident of that around here. But we need you guys to keep subscribing so we can keep expanding. And you've been doing fantastic for us so far. And it really is appreciated. So let's go a little more into some of these stories here and see what else we got. Yeah, that CGL thing again, waiting for the RCMP to ever respond to that. What's going on? What's with your investigation there? Other things, convoy claims contradicted. This was from a couple of days ago, but still, it was a Toronto Star story claiming Ottawa police recovered loaded shotguns from Freedom Convoy truckers. We talked a bit about that earlier. There's no charges because it didn't happen. We're doing the follow-up finally on what has gone on these protests and that. No guns. Well, that's a big deal, guys. I'm still dealing with ding-dongs and peckerheads on Twitter who say this was an insurrection. We had to stop it. There was a declaration of a new order and stuff. Hey, any crackpot could throw an internet thing out saying we're going to take over the government. Was there ever a realistic threat? Was there ever a realistic chance or effort or anything to be seen saying that this was going to happen? No, of course not. One of the only things they could possibly claim was they had a bunch of firearms ready for the insurrection. Well, it turns out there were none. And Conservative MP Dane Lloyd from Sturgeon River in Alberta raised it at a Commons Public Safety Committee. These committees are where the real stuff is happening. We're not seeing it in Parliament, but thankfully in committees, the real stuff's getting exposed, and our ugly mainstream media isn't covering enough of it. That's the thing. The Toronto Star embarrassed themselves, by putting that in. A story headlined by Justin Ling. He's a freelancer, but they put it in called Inside the Convoy. And it claimed that they had concealed weapons in their vehicles. It said, fears there were weapons inside some of the trucks proved prescient. A police source said that loaded shotguns were found. That's what Ling wrote for the Red Star. And the story was quoted by the public safety minister, Marco Mendicino. And he was saying it's nothing short of miraculous that nobody was seriously injured. Well, considering there were no bloody guns in the first place, I guess it's not that much of a miracle. But I mean, this was a legislation built on bullshit. That's the problem. The Emergencies Act was not justified. There was not enough reason to bring it in, and we're finding that out now. The facts are coming out. But the mainstream media doesn't want to touch it. The Red Star sure doesn't want to admit that they helped contribute to that BS with stories like that. The Alberta Prosperity Project, Kathy, you asked about that. Actually, yes, I got to follow up on that email today. I talked to Dr. Modry, and we're probably going to have him on for a talk sometime through this week, actually. So we'll get onto that a little later. That other talk, Dave mentioned that in the story. Cabinet must regulate the internet in Canada to curb Russian disinformation. This is where it gets dangerous again. You see the government's using every excuse, everything in their power to control information. Information is everything. I mean, if you really do go all the way back and read 1984, Orwell knew what he was talking about. A true authoritarian, totalitarian state has to make sure that they are controlling what we see, what we hear, and what we can say. And it was done in the Soviet Union in the past, and in Canada, they want to move that way. They want to that's what I mean. They're using the carrot for some of these publications with their subsidies and things such as that, or the CBC itself, which is just a state arm of the Liberal Party these days. And then they're going to use the stick on the rest of us. And that's when they start. They'll say, oh, it's just the Russian stuff that we're going to ban. It's just this stuff. It's just that stuff. They will move farther. They will. And they'll come after publications like the Western Standard. They're using C11, things like that, to try and shut down non-legacy media communication. It's very dangerous, very disturbing. And we've got to stand up for it. But again, as the story writes, getting back to that Association of Journalists, self-described as the national voice of Canadians or journalists, breached their own records, breached their own ethics code. The records are showing with that pipeline protest. Media is really problematic in Canada and needs to change. But hey, not all hope's lost. We're out here. We got independent stuff going on, and it's important. You guys are the ones doing it for us. I'm going to talk about quickly one more time with our sponsor, Bitcoinwell, and we did talk to Dave Bradley earlier. I know you're getting a lot on it, but hey, this stuff's important. That's the other way we keep independent, is sponsors and people paying for our time. And hey, if you want to advertise on here, got a product or service, or you got a campaign or something, send me an email there, cmorgan@westernstandardonline.com. Let's talk. We could work something out perhaps. And Bitcoinwell has been one of those sponsors, and they have spots, as you can see, all across the country with all of those dots on the sign. They got ATMs. They got one-on-one service. This is quite a company, these guys. And if you want to get yourself into Bitcoin and digital currencies, these are the guys to help you into it. Jane and I got a little confused. I got to admit, we're older folks. We were trying to set up our Bitcoin wallet and everything because the Western Standard has a plan where a portion of my salary gets paid in Bitcoin, and then it gets matched by the Western Standard, goes into my wallet. And I'm still a bit of a Luddite, and we got confused trying to get that wallet set up and things like that. And we got a personal phone call from one of the reps at Bitcoinwell, and she walked us through it. And we got that all set up. That's what these guys do. And if you want corporate accounts, things like that, these guys are the ones to talk to. So yeah, tune in tomorrow. Actually, I haven't, Kathy, I haven't booked Dr. Modry yet, but it's going to be this week. And I did, as I said, have communications with him on the weekend. So we're going to get him in soon. And tomorrow, yes, I'll be talking to Dr. Leslyn Lewis, a Conservative Party of Canada candidate. Mouthful there, isn't it? It will be recorded, but we'll run that, and I'm looking forward to asking her some questions. And I'm going to have Crystal Whittevrangel from the Montreal Economic Institute, because they're talking about another oil project in Canada that needs to be approved, and it's not in the West for a change. So hang in there, guys. Thanks for joining me today, and I will see you all tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. We will have another good show on deck for you. So have a good night.